Hi, my name is Fawn and I'm an addict. Jimmy K was a friend of mine. I was blessed to know him personally. I put these interviews together in the hopes that you could get a glimpse of the man who told me that if I gave Narcotics Anonymous a chance, I would never have to be alone again, I would never have to run again, and I would learn how to stand on my own 2 feet and think for myself.
He was a man of great wisdom, and he had been through so many ups and downs, and I knew that he was blessed with the gift of fortitude. Jimmy became like a relative of mine. And, I told him what a blessing that he had become in my life. You know, he was just a remarkable man.
I think the big thing that he wanted was for NA to grow and to stand on its own 2 feet. That was the big thing that he always, you know, he didn't want us to be second fiddle to anybody. He wanted us to be on our own, and that was his goal, and to make this thing grow. He had stuff all over the place. In fact, that was before the start, I was making a little joke that I had made some notes on some of the things that I wanted to remind myself of, and then I thought that I'd lost the notes, and that was what Jimmy always did. He'd make notes. So, okay, yeah, I got to write all this down, and he'd write all this different stuff down, and then he'd say, where did I leave those notes?
When he talked about the newcomer, he talked about it with a passion. It was almost a reverence, you know, that he had for the newcomer. And I think that he imparted that to everybody that he talked to. Jimmy wanted, you know, the message to be carried to all corners of the globe, you know. Wherever there were addicts, he wanted the message there.
He taught me a lot of things. You know, being clean is not just, it's a gift, and it's something to be shared. Once he got you in his office, he'd take you to all the letters that were coming in from all over the world, inquiries about Narcotics Anonymous, and he would get just excited. He was like a little kid in a candy store getting his first piece of chocolate. He would open up these letters. He'd say, read this, Mel. Look, this guy's from Australia, or this one's from you know, just England, or this one's from Switzerland, or just all over the world. He'd be getting inquiries about, and he says, this is going to grow. Jimmy's really not gone. I mean, he's physically not here, but in spirit, Jimmy's watching.
I know he wanted growth, and that's why it was always so important for him. I mean, he was always so jazzed when he would get a letter from somewhere out of Los Angeles. He would get really excited. He would talk about it. That's why I say he always had people helping with correspondence and trying to get literature out, and you knew that it was very important to him that the program grew.
It first started out, you know, we talked about literature, but he talked about him being a roofer and I was a plumber, so we sort of had that thing in common, you know, construction work, and we talked a little bit about that and how we were really getting off the ground here in Baltimore with NA. You know, it was very young. We only had 5 or 6 meetings, didn't really have any literature. You know, we were beginning to develop as a fellowship and trying to figure out the direction we needed to go in, and we really didn't know much about NA. At the time, most of us went to meetings around Baltimore. We went to D.C., Virginia, because there wasn't enough meetings around our area to go to. So, you know, when I would talk to him, he would tell me about how basically what we were going through here is what he had gone through many, many years earlier in California with the NA growing. I always felt like I could do it here, and he really emphasized to me that I could stay clean in Narcotics Anonymous.
My belief is Jimmy was the glue. His spirit was enormous. His enthusiasm for Narcotics Anonymous was endless. It was just endless. It's like here I am, New York, and I'm talking to this guy over the phone, and I'm envisioning a man like John Wayne, like 6'6", and like he's my hero, and like I finally get out to California and meet him, and he wasn't 6'6", he was this little man. He was little in body, but his spirit was bigger than John Wayne. I loved the man, and he changed my life and opened my eyes to a lot of things that I would have never seen if it wasn't for Jimmy.
My best moments were like on the phone with him when I would call. I would leave a meeting and I'd be new. So I'd come back from a meeting and I'd call Jimmy and I'd say, Jimmy, do you know what they said? Because I was so used to being wrong, and I was so used to not trusting on my own judgment. And I wasn't about to trust it on my own. I had at least learned that to check it out. So it was those moments with him when he validated, and he was constantly doing that. He loved addicts. He loved himself.
He seemed like he was on fire for what at that time to me was foreign, although I got to live it now personally. But he kept on talking about recovery, and he had a special way of saying those words that it had a pull on me, even though I did not understand what he was saying. I always remember he told me, Frankie, this is a 24-hour program. 12 and 12. 12 steps, 12 traditions. 12 hours for the personal steps, and the 12 traditions for the other 12 hours, 24 steps, 24 hours. His passion to me was that he was trying to enhance and expand in people, to involve them in having meetings and more meetings and more meetings, and doing more service work and more meetings, so that we could have it more available and to also reach other addicts in other countries. I remember when I went to see him at the hospital before he passed away, it's the same thing, we need to get a meeting started, we need to keep getting more and more meetings. And don't forget that traditions are very important.
If you walked into Jimmy's house, he put you to work. Of course, at that time we didn't have any money, and we had to do, what we had to do for the fellowship. And if you walked in there, you had to do stuffing envelopes or answering the phone or running to an errand or something like that. He always had a pot of tea, of hot water going for people for tea. He always had this. It was a brass little tea holder for water. I'll never forget it because I used it all the time. And he always had some coffee going. And he was always talking about how to help the newcomer. Jimmy wanted Narcotics Anonymous to be a worldwide fellowship instead of just saying that we're a worldwide fellowship. I think that he wanted for any addict seeking recovery to have it in Narcotics Anonymous. I think that was probably his biggest dream.
We have to eventually talk about his pickup. His truck, which had a big hole on the shotgun side, so when he used to take you to meetings, you'd have to watch where you put your feet at. And this truck he had was an old Chevy. It was either red on the bottom and white on top, and he had the old choke on it. You stepped on it to start the truck up on, and it started up. You had to be careful because there was a big hole right there. You could stick your foot right through the floorboard. It was rusted out.
This is where the first hotline, I believe, that the Rebel was to try to help addicts with the ideas that we had at that time. There weren't many of us, that's for sure, but we were willing to try these ideas and see if we could make some kind of a dent in the disaster that was taking place even then in the field of addiction. Things have changed a lot in the intervening years. I don't think they've gotten much better in many ways. We do know that thousands of addicts are walking the streets today that probably wouldn't have made it otherwise. This is only due to the dedication of a lot of people in the intervening years. People who are willing to put aside their own selves, their own self-will and their own ego in order to help others like ourselves. My mind's been working while I've been sitting here talking, you know, and perhaps I didn't make myself as clear about the two parts of our literature that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the whole Little White Book. I'm talking about one part that we put into that at the insistence of several of the members at that time. I told them I had written this for me. This was part of my story. These are the things that I had to do. And I put it on paper, and as we would talk, sitting here at the house very often, some of the first members, this I'll talk about later on, there's some discrepancies here that are very hard to cover at all points at the same time.